All right, Michael Baumgartner here with us today, one of our congressional five dis district candidates. So thank you for being with us today and doing these interviews, Michael. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so we'll go through a couple questions. I'll give you a couple minutes to introduce yourself, and then we'll just have about 3 minutes for each of the following questions, and then give you some time to do some final comments. We're thinking about 20 minutes total-ish. So again, thank you. We'll start with Michael. Tell us about yourself and why you are running for this position.
Well, thanks. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Michael Baumgartner. I'm a recovering state senator, served 8 years in the Washington State Legislature, and I'm now the treasurer of Spokane County. Grew up here in Eastern Washington, the son of a forestry professor, and my mother was 43 years a kindergarten teacher. My wife, Eleanor, and I met in Afghanistan on a counter-narcotics team. We were civilians in Afghanistan. I had been 1 year in Iraq and then went to Afghanistan and met the love of my life there. I always tell people if they don't believe in God or Providence, they should learn about the Baumgartner story, meeting above amongst the bullets and the bombs and the challenges of southern Afghanistan. And we are blessed with 5 beautiful kids. Our oldest is just turned 13 and our youngest just turned 4. And it is really for those 5 wonderful children that I'm running for Congress. Not just my kids, but everybody's kids. I look at across our country, and you look at what's going wrong in America, this sense of rising crime, prices out of control, this cultural woke stuff that's just infiltrating the schools. And it just feels like the America that we know and love that it's being lost. And I don't want that for my kids. I don't want that for anybody's kids. And so I'm stepping forward to run for this, to go to Washington, D.C. and help straighten out Congress and try to protect the American dream for all of us here in Eastern Washington.
Well, that's great. We appreciate you running and thank you for, doing what you can. Appreciate it. So why do you believe that people should vote for you this August over your fellow opponents?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there is some good candidates in the race, but I think if you look carefully, that you'll see a real difference in expertise, background, and ability to win. So I'll start with the ability to win. I'm the only candidate in the race that actually has beat a Democrat. So I beat a Democrat incumbent when I first got in the state Senate and what was the most expensive legislative race in state history. And then I beat Democrats once I got to Olympia. We actually kicked the Democrats out of power and took control of Olympia. So that's rare in a left-wing state like Washington that we've actually fought and won. And so for the 8 years I was in the state Senate, I was a chair or in the majority and a powerful committee chair during that time as well, too. So we've beat Democrats. I'm the only candidate in the race that has actually drained the swamp. So when I talk about what needs to happen to protect this great republic of ours and protect America, the 3 things I talk about are beating Democrats, draining the swamp, and making Eastern Washington great. And if you compare my track record to the other candidates, I think it just doesn't compare. So look at draining the swamp. When I was there, one of the great things that we did was eliminate 5 government agencies. We took a government bureaucracy and we shrunk it down, and then we fired Jay Inslee's incompetent Secretary of Transportation. So I've drained the swamp in Olympia, and I'll look forward to draining the swamp when I get to Washington, D.C. And then if you think about making Eastern Washington great, some of the big projects that I worked on were bringing a new medical school here to Spokane. We really needed a lot more doctors in Eastern Washington, particularly in our rural areas. There was this really dumb law that gave University of Washington a monopoly on medical education, and they fought hard against it in Olympia, but I always say we whipped them like Ryan Leaf whipped them in the Apple Cup, and we need more doctors. Now we have more doctors being produced in Spokane than they do in Seattle. And then everybody had always talked about finally finishing the North-South Freeway. It still has taken too long, but I made sure that we finally got our fair share of transportation funding, made sure that all those dollars weren't going into bike lanes and buses and rainbow unicorns in downtown Seattle, and actually getting our important infrastructure here. So we did that as well too. And so I have this background, I think, compared to the other candidates. And just the final thing I'll say is, while I am not a military veteran, I was a civilian. When my country was struggling in Iraq and Afghanistan, I left my professional career to try to help. So I went to Iraq during the surge and conducted counterinsurgency operations. I've seen the best of our troops up close. Again, I'm not a veteran, but I do appreciate them and have seen their struggles and what they go through regularly. And so I think I'm the only candidate that has served overseas. And I always say that, my favorite thing about President Donald Trump was that when he decided he and Mike Pompeo decided that Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian terrorist leader, need to be killed because he was a terrible menace, Islamic terrorist, and he killed so many Americans. He almost killed me on a few occasions. And I was very pleased when President Trump took that brave and bold step. And so I think you just see a difference between me and some of the other candidates in skills, background, and ability.
Okay. All right. Given the pervasive influence of money and lobbyists in Washington, D.C., along with the strong presence of special interest groups, how do you intend to effectively navigate and combat these pressures to genuinely represent and stand up for the interests of the citizens in the 5th Congressional District?
Yeah, that's a great question because, lobbyists and political donations are part of the American political system. It's unfortunate they are. It would be better if as many people were as interested in politics as you and your PCOs were, and they actually showed up and learned. And instead, it wasn't about these TV commercials and kind of these vapid sort of things. But they are part of it. And I think if you look at every candidate in the race that's held elected office, so there's primarily 3 of us that have been in Olympia, all of us have political donations in our past. So I think the key thing you need to ask is, who are they from? So I'm a conservative. I went to Olympia and I'm going to Washington to advance conservative values. And I only have support from groups that are like support small business or support gun rights or support individual liberty. If you look at my opponents, and this is just reality. If you look at the record, you look at Jacqueline Maycomber, she's been supported by the Labor Council. The Labor Council is usually diametrically opposed to small business, and the Labor Council is someone that supports people like Bob Ferguson, Maria Cantwell, and Jay Inslee. So the Labor Council is supporting Jacqueline Maycomber. I'm someone that supported right to work and more freedoms. And so I support conservative ideas. And then if you look at Brian Danzel, the fact of the matter is he was supported by the WA Teachers Union when he was in Olympia. I've never been supported by WA Teachers Union. Again, I'm supported by groups that are more conservative in their outlook. And so, when I get to Washington, D.C., if I'm lucky enough to do that, knock on wood, it won't change my moral compass about what I'm fighting for, and which is to make Eastern Washington more conservative and make our state more conservative, make our country more conservative, and restore those wonderful American values.
All right. Thank you. So this is a question on people's minds. Given the challenges and controversies surrounding COVID-19 mandates, what specific steps would you advocate for at the federal level to balance public health interests with individual liberties? And how would you work to prevent the overreaching use of mandates for measures such as masking and vaccination in future public health crisis?
Well, it's a great question and a really important one, because it is shocking how during the COVID epidemic and era, so many of our personal freedoms were infringed upon by folks using scare tactics and this ability to this unknown. And, they claimed that a lot of it was in science. We've since learned that whether it was Mr. Fauci or others, it wasn't based in science, a lot of the things that they were doing. And so it really is a cause of concern. And it can't happen again. And quite frankly, they have really eroded public trust by so many of the decisions that they have made. So, what to do about it? Well, first and foremost, we, as a member of Congress, I will be fighting for those people that were unfairly relieved of federal jobs or from the military because they didn't want to exercise their personal freedom so that they didn't have to take those vaccines. We should bring them back. We can't hit our military recruitment goals to begin with. And so we need to both allow those people to come back and stop some of the woke nonsense that is infiltrating our military recruitment process. So that would be one, advocating for them. And I think making sure that folks are held to account. There do need to be hearings held and people held to account for what happened during the COVID era. So we understand, it was so, in my view of what we've learned is that it seems it was so clear that it likely came from China, a laboratory in China that the US likely was funding. and that there was such an effort to ever say that was racism, just to say that or point that out, and which is really crazy. That folks wouldn't allow you just to look at the truth on that issue because they would say it was racist. I mean, China is by and large a strategic adversary of us. We at least have to be prepared to think of them that way, and that there was still so much of this confusion around U.S. funding that went into these laboratories and what might have happened. So we need to understand that, make sure it doesn't happen again, and stand up for people's personal liberty. And I certainly, both within Congress and then just as being a voice for personal freedom, will do that if I'm in that position.
Yeah, that's good. That's a big issue on people's hearts right now. This is a bigger question. It's got multiple facets to it. So if you take a little longer, I'm good with that. How do you plan to address the most pressing issues facing our constituents, such as illegal immigration, cost of living and inflation, and crime and national debt? I know it's a bit loaded.
Yeah, let me start with the illegal immigration. So I think the number one priority for America right now has to be securing our southern border. I recently, a couple of weeks ago, was down at the southern border with President Trump's former Secretary of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, and Morgan Ortagus, a frequent Fox News host who used to work for the state under Mike Pompeo as a spokesman for the State Department. And it is shocking what we saw at the border. First, before I went down there, I talked to sheriffs and law enforcement all across Eastern Washington. And every single one of them talked about how fentanyl is a problem in every community in Eastern Washington in our state. Part of that is because Olympia, with the left-wing radicals running Olympia, where they've made crime basically legal in our state in many sense, that we have become a drug conduit, or even more of a drug conduit, coming up from Mexico. But the fentanyl is now just impacting every community. It is so scary with the dollar hit, and that's coming from Mexico. And so we have to look at that in a very serious way. It is also a humanitarian catastrophe. It is not humane to incentivize folks to take these dangerous trips. Children were being trafficked, we learned about. I saw kids crossing in the middle of the night. The refugee system is being abused. And it is anyone that thinks it's humane to entice people to come this way, they just do not understand the facts on the ground. So I mean, and then it is a national security crisis. It is destabilizing the Mexican government on our border. There's been something like 40 assassinations just in the last few months of Mexican local government officials because the drug cartels want to control these entry points. And so it just has to be fixed. And probably as a taxpayer, one of the most frustrating things I saw was there are tens of millions of dollars of good from the Trump administration funds just lying on the ground, not being used because for political reasons, Joe Biden doesn't want to put it up. So they're putting up this kind of chicken wire stuff in a few places. So that's just such a lack of leadership. So the border has to be fixed, which means completing the wall, stopping, reenacting Remain in Mexico. These folks that are not refugees should not be allowed and brought in on an unvetted purpose. And then we need to look at things like E-Verify to make sure that folks aren't exploiting the circumventing the legal way to work in our country. So it's a multi-step thing. So that would be one of the key things that we have to do. And to me, that's the most important issue. When I was in Olympia, I was really good at creating leverage. And when you pass legislation, you got to create leverage and fix things. And I would leverage other interests of the Democrats to try to fix that border issue. I think it has to be fixed. And I'm sorry, since I was going on border, can you tell me the other two that you want to
cost of living and inflation, and then crime and national debt.
Yeah, let me talk about cost of living. And they're a little bit related. In the COVID era, again, with this huge overreaction, by mandate, productive activity was stopped almost all across the country. Some states it was better than others. God bless Florida and some of those places that fought back a little harder or had the ability. I know there were many of us in Washington State that were outraged when the governor shut down construction and these sorts of things. But in any event, when you shut productive activity and then you flood spending in terms of COVID relief dollars into communities, you got rampant inflation. And so a lot of it is tied to this reckless government spending. We have now over $35 trillion in debt, and that is a number so big that people don't even understand, what it means. And so we got to rein in that reckless spending. We have to have balanced budgets, and we need to make sure that government stops doing things that make things more expensive. In our state, a perfect example is housing. The left says they want to have more housing. We need more housing. And then they do nutty things like heat pump mandates or really expensive environmental processes that just make costs so much more expensive. You know, in Washington State, we build some of the most expensive schools in the country. We have Taj Mahal schools oftentimes, and they look fancy and else, but you know, the greatest generation or our generation went to school in more modest schools. Do we need such elaborate, expensive schools? Well, you know, they're not free. They cost tax dollars. You know, they make things more expensive. And so government needs to not do things that make things more expensive. And we need to rein in this reckless spending because this inflation is just killing people. I hear it every day as the treasurer of Spokane County. I get a lot of old folks that come into my office, or not necessarily all old, but man, a lot of widows come in and feel like they can't stay in their home because they're being priced out and they don't own their home. The government does. They just rent it to them. And I have 5 kids. You know what it's like to go to the grocery store right now with 5 kids? You know, I mean, it's just nuts how expensive it is just to feed the family. We've really had to cut back on how many restaurants. I mean, we rarely go to restaurants to begin with. And I drive a 2011 Toyota Highlander, and my wife drives a 2011 Toyota Sienna. So we are used car people. We are Dave Ramsey type people. I actually have a bumper sticker on the back of my car that says Dave Ramsey makes me drive this. But even for us, you know, we're pretty modest, and it has just gotten so expensive, and it's a killer for young families.
Yeah. Yeah, for
And
sure.
then so we talked
Yep.
about budget, and then so the budget, you know, it's just unfair for $35 trillion in debt, which is we are robbing our children's future, and we have to look at things like a balanced budget amendment. We need to have members of Congress that are strong and start saying no to these continuing spending resolutions. You know, the great advantage when we were in the state legislature, even in a left-wing state like Washington State, when we were in the majority, we always had balanced budgets, did not rely on tax increases, and when we were doing those, we had a part-time legislature. So when we didn't get our work done, people knew and they got grumpy about it. And then the big advantage is we couldn't print money. We were forced to make decisions to work together. And the problem with the federal government right now is you can just spin the wheel, continuing spending resolutions, and you don't force people to make choices. And so, you know, it is a huge issue, and it has to be solved. And one of my goals of going to Congress, if I'm lucky enough to make it, is to really work on the national debt and try to put America on a more sustainable financial footing because my kids deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So how do you, Michael, plan to engage with and be accountable to your constituents here in the 5th District?
Great question. I love doing town halls, and I think I've done more town halls in my last 14 years of being an elected official. I can't believe it's been that long than anybody else in Eastern Washington. I would love to do at least one monthly town hall. I would love to do regular video calls from Olympia or from Washington, D.C. When I was in the Senate, I did something called Shadow Your Senator, where you could come over and you didn't have to be you know, it could just be anybody that wanted to come over and spend time with me and go see what life was like in the day of senator. I'd love to do something like that, you know, in Washington, D.C. Obviously, a little harder to get to Washington, D.C. than it is to get to Olympia. But I think that just, you know, constant engagement. And, you know, I certainly, it's impossible. I mean, there's a lot of different people in Eastern Washington. You know, you have to try to represent all of them. I am a conservative, but, you know, it could be from time to time, there's some things we disagree on. But even if we disagree on the policy, I will always do my best to try to make sure people understand why I took the votes that I did and try to explain them. You know, and I like to my goal is to try to make this place more conservative and try to keep America being America. And I like to try to communicate those ideas. And I think, you know, I think I do a better job of, I try to enjoy trying to communicate conservative ideas. And to me, that's really important to try to be a good communicator as a member of Congress and try to win some people over to the conservative cause. And, you know, and I think I'll be in a good position to try and do that. So town halls, I'll engage with young people. I believe strongly in when you're an elected official, you got to be a team player, especially as Republicans. We're the underdogs. You know, I used to do a lot of counterinsurgency with the alongside, again, I'm a civilian, but alongside the U.S. military. And when you're an insurgent, you're an underdog. And so we have to think like insurgents, which means not fighting the same way. Can't be Lucy in the football. We can't all pile into one gubernatorial, you know, for example, I mean, the governor's very important, but you all pile into one U.S. Senate or gubernatorial race, spend all your money there, and then you're losing school boards, you're losing judge races, and things. And that's where you have to go grass up on things. But I believe strongly in being a team player. And so I will make every effort that I can to help equip and train future politicians that want to get their future staff members and give people opportunities. I'm very proud that on my staff, if you look at I've had previous elected leaders. I've had one of a young man, Clay Leland, who started, I think, as a high school sophomore, knocking on doors for me in my first state Senate election. or he might have been a junior then in high school. But he wasn't definitely not a graduate. Well, Clay, a couple years ago was a lawyer in the Trump White House, and how cool is that to give people, a young person like that opportunity? And so we want to do that and help the legislature. And I'm very committed to doing that as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, this one came out of nowhere when I did my first interview. So in all fair, so you can play
Shoot, it's
along or
fine. It's
not,
fine. Ask whatever
but
you
it was
want.
an additional question I thought was really important. So just one, who is your favorite congressperson in right now?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, to be honest, I don't know a ton of them all that well. The ones that I do see, I like the looks of Jim Jordan in part because I just think he asks good questions in his Judiciary Committee. And also, when I was the chair of the Commerce and Labor Committee, I never wore a jacket. And so I like the fact he goes just the shirt and tie look. When I was in committee, that's the same way I look. Actually, I did it before Jim Jordan. That was my look. So but he would be one that comes to mind, yeah, certainly. And I really like Mike Pompeo. He's not in Congress anymore, but I like what he did for President Trump in terms of protecting our national security and his background. And I had the opportunity to meet him. So those would be two that come to mind. What I believe strongly when you're again, politics is a team sport. So when we were in the Senate, overall in the state Senate there are 49 senators. So the key to passing a law was to get 25 of those senators to agree, or to get 25 of them to kill something. Sometimes you just wanted to stop something from being passed. Obviously, in Congress, there's 435, members of the House. So you're looking at 220 on your, if you're a majority on your Republican side. And so, navigating that and building a coalition and teamwork, that'll be important. I'm looking forward to getting back and meeting some of those folks and working together and finding like-minded conservatives that share my values for balanced budgets and trying to protect America.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for answering that. So final comments, you got a couple minutes, 2 minutes to just wrap her up and tell everybody what you want to say. Final thoughts.
Sure. Just thanks everyone that is seeing this video that participates in as a PCO or otherwise. This is we are very blessed to have a republic, and it doesn't keep itself. It is from one generation to the next, and you don't keep the republic just by watching cable TV and making posts on Facebook. You have to get active, and participate. You got to bring converts into the cause. You need to knock on doors and support good candidates. And, I hope that folks watch this video and decide that I am a candidate that they want to support, but, find somebody, and help them, do something this election style, get off the couch, go to do more than just go to a Republican PCO meeting, get in the streets, and try to use when you do it, even though we're right, try to do it in a way that's not angry, try to do it in a way that you're serious, but you're a happy, conservatives, we have this wonderful country and we should be happy about trying to save it, and be the optimist about trying to save it and think about what America can be, because, as I say, there's nothing that's wrong with America that can't be solved with what's right about America. And if I could do anything, the final thing I just say is that if the founding fathers were to come forward through time and look at the situation in America right now, they'd be astounded by three things. The first thing they'd be astounded by is just like what's going on with the culture right now, and some of the cultural challenge. The second would be they'd be shocked at the size of the federal government. They would look at it and say, how did a series of states and a federal system have a federal government that's got so big and so powerful? The power is supposed to be at the local level. It's supposed to be at the states and the local level. And the third thing they'd be shocked is, how in the world did Congress give away so much of its own authority? The People's House is supposed to be the strongest branch of government. And the fact that the Congress has given so much of its power to the executive branch, and then by extension, the judiciary, it's like Congress needs to do its job. It needs to claw this stuff back. And what we really have in America is really a crisis of constitutional imbalance. And if we could return to the Constitution, have the system the way that this founders intended, we have a great chance to keep this republic. And that's what I'm committed to. And I appreciate everybody out there that's helping like-minded candidates do the same. So thank you for this opportunity. It's nice to have a chance to visit with you.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you for participating in this very much. We appreciate that. And we really appreciate you and your service to our community, in your experience in your past here, and good luck on this race.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. All right.